We have done plenty of set reviews from previous sets where we've gone through, parsed out some of the cards that we thought would be interesting in a Dimir or a blue black X shell in modern. But today we got a little bit of a special one for you. I saw a spoiler that really jumped out to me. And if you've been on the stream lately or you've been in the Discord, you probably know exactly what card I'm talking about. And that is Wan Shi Tong Librarian from the new Avatar set. So even though this video is going to be fairly short, hoping to cover three very distinct topics. First off, a breakdown of Wan Shi Tong Librarian, some of the aspects of the card, what makes it unique. Second off, I'm going to cover why I think it could be a good addition to the Dimir, especially archetype, but blue-black X in modern in general. And then three, hopefully go over any changes that I would make to the existing list to try to maximize the potential benefit of Wan Shi Tong. So first off, let's go ahead and get into our breakdown. So if you have not seen this card, it's a new spoiler from the Avatar set coming up in about a month. Wan Shi Tong Librarian is X and 2 blue for a 1/1 legendary bird spirit. It's got flash, flying, vigilance. When Wan Shi Tong enters, put X/1/1 counters on him, then draw half X cards rounded down. And whenever an opponent searches their library, put a +1/+1 counter on Wan Shi Tong and draw a card. A lot to unpack here. So let's just go ahead and break it down like top to bottom, easiest way. X and 2 blue means we can potentially pay 0 for X for a 2 blue, 1/1 flash, flying, and vigilance. Not the greatest stat line in the world for just 2 mana. But we're not so worried about the stats. We're worried about the abilities. So when it enters, put X/1/1 counters on him, then draw half X cards rounded down. So for mana value comparison, let's look at subtlety. Subtlety, you have the chance to evoke, but if you're hard casting it, 4 mana for a 3/3 flyer that when it enters, return or put a creature or planeswalker from the stack on top of its owner's library or the bottom if they choose. For 4 mana, you get the same size body, 3/3 flash flyer. You gain vigilance, and instead of putting a creature or planeswalker on the top or bottom of its owner's library, you draw a card. Fairly interesting 1-to-1 comparison. I would even argue that Wan Shi Tong probably has the better upside because at the end of the day, its ability is more proactively based. You getting to draw a card is oftentimes more powerful than putting something on top, meaning that your opponent had to put a legal target on the stack to begin with, where Wan Shi Tong has the ability to just be played out proactively for value. As the game goes on, it does have the ability to pay more for X. So for example, if you pay 3 for X instead of 2, you get a 4/4 flash, flying, vigilant, but the draw does not change on the odd increments. So going from 2 to 3, 3 halved is 1.5, rounded down is still 1 card. So if you want those extra cards, make sure you're paying in even increments to get the next card up, the next tier. But for a late game top deck, say 6 mana isn't unreasonable in your mid-range control deck for a 5/5 or 4/4, 5/5 flying vigilance that draws 2 cards. That's pretty good rate. Really good at ending the game quickly. And because it does have flash, you don't have to worry about tapping out on your turn in the case of things like Quantum Riddler currently. And then the last ability, whenever an opponent searches their library, put a +1/+1 counter on Wan Shi Tong and draw a card. So the real big search effects in modern right now are things like Summoner's Pact, Urza's Saga Chapter 3, Green Sun Zenith, Court of Calling, and of course fetch lands. Fetch lands are everywhere, just about every deck outside of like Tron runs fetches, but Tron has Expedition map, Amulet doesn't run fetches, but they have Green Sun Zenith, Summoner's Pact, and Urza's Saga. Pretty much every other deck in the format runs some amount of fetches that Wan Shi Tong can potentially interact with to draw an additional card. So some lines that could possibly come up is you're on the play, the end of your turn 2, your opponent goes to fetch their 1 land, you respond with Wan Shi Tong. You've just paid 2 mana for a 2/2 flash flying vigilant creature that drew you a card because their opponent's going to finish resolving their fetch. You're going to get a trigger to draw a card, even if they take out the Wan Shi Tong at that point. They could gut shot with no mana available, but as soon as that fetch resolves, you get a trigger for Wan Shi Tong. Notably, both abilities do not require that the counter be put on Wan Shi Tong to draw the cards. So if you pay 4 mana, you get would get a 3/3, comes in as a 1/1. The trigger goes on the stack to put the counters onto it. Your opponent kills it, response. You still get to draw the cards. It doesn't say something like adapt, where if you do draw half X cards rounded down, you just get to draw half X cards rounded down. Same thing with the search ability. If they search and they finish searching while Wan Shi Tong is on the battlefield, then you get a trigger to draw a card. Notably, Bowmasters is an interesting interaction with Wan Shi Tong. So if your opponent's got an Orcish Bowmaster and you flash out a Wan Shi Tong, if the Bowmaster is already on the battlefield, then the trigger for Wan Shi Tong goes on the stack when it enters. The trigger resolves, you get the counters added to the bird, and then you draw the cards. So the counters are already on when the Bowmaster triggers go on the stack. Then since it's half of the counters, they're not going to have the ability to shoot down the bird unless they've got multiple Bowmasters on the field. But they're not going to have the ability to shoot down the bird, which means you're going to have a flying vigilant threat that's bigger, more than likely, than Bowmaster and the Orc Army token. And probably going to be able to outrace from that scenario. Same thing with the search trigger. The 1/1 counter does go on with the card draw. So 1 draw, 1/1/1 counter. Your opponent's not going to be able to out Bowmaster. That being said, if you flash in Wan Shi Tong and the trigger goes on the stack and your opponent has a Bowmaster in hand and responds to the trigger with shoot the Wan Shi Tong, then you don't get the counter, but you still draw the cards, and those Bowmaster triggers are going to ping you. Thankfully, Bowmasters is not the most common card in Modern at the moment, so less of a concern than you might think it is. Now let's move on to number 2, which is why Dimir, I think, could be very interested in this card. First off, one of the main points I've made about Dimir in the last few months is I think a significant part of the game plan that's missing is a good value early 1 or 2 drop. We've tried out cards like Snapcaster Mage, Fairy Mastermind, Malcolm Alluring Scoundrel. These cards that are okay. They don't scale very well. They're okay in the early turns. You usually need to do something proactive to get them value. Like, for instance, Malcolm needs to flash in, untap, and get damage in. Fairy Mastermind needs your opponent to do something that says draw a card. Snapcaster, not a great 2 mana play. Really needs to be like turn 3, 4, 5. Wan Shi Tong is a little bit different than all of these because all you really need is your opponent to fetch, and you've immediately recouped the value off of casting the card. You don't have to attack. So if you're able to respond to a fetch early, or your opponent plays Surveil Land on 1, goes to fetch on 2 to play their 2-drop, you respond with flash in a Wan Shi Tong, you've probably already regained that value back. And then you have the potential of maybe catching a fetch on their third turn or later on as well. So it does give you benefit as the game goes on passively, where a lot of these other cards you have to proactively create the benefit, as well as, or in addition, the later the game goes, the more Wan Shi Tong scales with what's going on. So the more lands you have in play, the bigger Wan Shi Tong you can cast off the top of the deck, draw more cards, pull yourself more ahead, where a lot of these other threats aren't creating card advantage. They're either creating card selection, like in the case of Malcolm, or in the case of Fairy Mastermind, they might be card advantage, but you have to give your opponent cards in order to do so. So Wan Shi Tong kind of ignores all that aspect and says, here's a threat that has a lot of play in the early turns of the game, but also can just be a great top deck to close out the game, draw a few cards, and that's a pretty significant advantage. I'm really interested in seeing how this card plays in the mid game. So around like turn 4, when your opponent still is looking to fetch, maybe they want to cast something like a Quantum Riddler, and you're able to respond to that 5th land with flash in my Wan Shi Tong, draw a card off of me paying 4 mana, you resolve your fetch, I get to draw another card, you put your Quantum Riddler on the stack, I've got my 5th mana available to Mystical Dispute, or I've got a Subtlety in hand, whatever the case may be, some form of interaction. And now this Wan Shi Tong is like drawing me 2 cards. I've got a 5/5 Vigilance body on the board. 4/4 Vigilance body on the board. Yeah, 4/4 Vigilance body on the board. They can potentially grow more if you decide to fetch again. I've drawn 2 cards off of it, and I'm kind of like pulling ahead fairly aggressively at that point. Obviously, it depends on the kind of interaction you have. Maybe you've got a counter spell in hand and you just flash it in for 2. They fetch, you draw a card and counter spell the Quantum Riddler. Now you have a 2/2 that drew you a card, replaced itself immediately. This is also a really cool enabler for Kaito. We already have Bowmaster in the deck. Bowmaster has definitely been fairly lackluster as of late, but Wan Shi Tong being able to come down on turn 2, maybe in response to a fetch to draw a card, but even if not, come down on turn 2, go to your turn, tack in, ninjutsu it back with Kaito, and now you have the ability to play it out and draw cards later on. So again, that scaling really comes into play, where you're able to use it out early, create an advantage, hopefully respond to a fetch, and then pull it back for Kaito, and then proactively play it out for 4 or whatever the case may be to draw some cards later. So that's why Dimir might be interested in it. Finally, any considerations I would make to adjusting the deck or how Wan Shi Tong kind of fits in the curve to try to make the deck better, or a better home for this card. A couple ideas that have kind of been bounced around the Discord, especially. We've seen people talk about Ghost Quarter and Field of the Ruin style effects, because it doesn't specify that your opponent has to search of their own free will. You can force your opponent to search with White Orchid Phantom, Ghost Quarter, Field of the Ruin, whatever the case may be, to proactively get a counter on Wan Shi Tong and draw a card. So I could very well see lines where you flash in your Wan Shi Tong on turn 2, turn 3, you have your Field of the Ruin, you Field of the Ruin your opponent on their end step and get a 1 mana counter spell active, or respond to whatever they do with Field of the Ruin, get your 1 mana counter, interact. Wan Shi Tong is definitely able to kind of pull you back on those cards if you have to pitch stuff early on. If you're forcing your opponent to search, you've got the potential of going Sultai for Ice Till Explorer. I don't know how much I love that plan, but I will say if you're able to slow the game down and start the Ice Till Ghost Quarter loop with Wan Shi Tong out, you're going to be drawing a lot of cards and doing a lot of disrupting. So it's hard to say that that's really not where you want to be if it has the potential to just slam the late game value wise. Plus the additional lands you get to play with your Ice Till could allow you to just cast a really big Wan Shi Tong late and pull ahead from there. So I do think there's some interesting ideas floating around in that realm. Finally, the number of Kaitos might need to go up now that we've got Wan Shi Tong. We still have Bowmasters if we want it. It would be really easy to create a shell that ninjutsu'd Kaito very, very consistently on turn 3 without having to give up too many value cards to do so. Now that we're getting more stuff that's like good on turn 2 or good on turn 4, 6, 8, whatever the case may be. So I think there's a lot of potential here for this card. Ultimately, I'm going to be trying it out probably as like a 2 of in most of the Dimir shells over either a number of top end threats, so like over the 4th Quantum Riddler, maybe over a Bowmaster, maybe over 2 Bowmasters, something like that, but just in a shell that's able to play Kaito, wants the late game big flash threat, and is probably going to be more Dimir based than Esper or Grixis or Sultai. But we'll also try some other options. We'll try out the Field of the Ruin Demolition Field style effects, see how they do, maybe make some Tron players a little upset along the way. Who could complain about that? But anyway, hope this inspired you to maybe give Wan Shi Tong a try. I know I'm going to. Let me know in the comments below what you think of the card, if you think it has a spot in Dimir, if it's going to make an impact, or if we're all just completely overacting and hopiuming our way to making this a solid card. But other than that, I hope y'all enjoy the content, enjoy the commentary. If you do, feel free to leave a like, consider subscribing to the channel. Down below, links to the Twitter, links to the Twitch if you want to catch a live stream when we do test it, links to the Discord if you want to come discuss the card further or hear any additional thoughts. Hope y'all have a fantastic rest of your day. Stay safe, enjoy some good food and company. I'll catch y'all back live later. Adios for now.